The morning mist still clung to the damp grass of Pin Hill Cemetery under the grey sky. Dozens of Murs stood in silence, their black attire blending with the sombre atmosphere. A small white coffin rested among a sea of white roses, painfully tiny, for a life that once burned so brightly. Then the silence was shattered. From the distance, a dark figure emerged, tearing through the rows of gravestones, muscular fur matted with mud. The pounding of heavy paws against the wet earth sent shockwaves through the gathered crowd. Gasps filled the air as the enormous K9 charged straight toward the coffin. "Stop that dog," someone yelled, but it was too late. Ranger Lily Dawson's loyal German shepherd placed his massive paws on the polished wood. Whining in sheer agony, he scratched at the surface, his whimpers turning into desperate growls. No one could understand why a disciplined CN9 would act this way, but deep within those sorrowful brown eyes lay a truth no one else could see. 3 years ago, Ranger wasn't a family pet. He was a warrior, Mark Dawson. Lily's father had been a veteran, K9 officer in Pine Hill. He had trained Ranger from a young pup, molding him into the perfect working dog, fast, powerful, and unwaveringly loyal. Ranger had been by Mark's side in countless missions, from tracking down criminals to searching for missing persons. To everyone else, he was a tool of justice. A disciplined creature bred to serve and protect. But to Lily, Ranger was never a tool. He was family when Mark was injured in the line of duty and forced to retire. The one silver lining was being able to bring Ranger home, but what Mark didn't realize was that in the days to come, Ranger wouldn't just be a retired Kine, he would become Lily's closest companion. From the very first day he stepped into the Dawson home, Ranger formed made an unbreakable bond with Lily. He didn't sleep in the living room or out in the yard. Like other dogs, he slept outside Lily's bedroom door, as if still on duty. If the door happened to be closed, he would patiently wait there all night, every morning. Lily woke up by burying her face in Ranger's thick fur. Breathing in his warmth, she whispered her secrets to him, believing that he was the only soul in the world who truly understood her. When she was sad, Ranger would rest his head on her lap, those deep brown eyes filled with quiet comfort. They had a game won, only they understood forever, promised Lily would. Place her small hand on Ranger's head and whisper, "We'll always be family, won't we?" And every single time Ranger would lift his paw to her hand like a vow, Ranger wasn't just a retired canine, he was the big brother Lily had never had. He was her warm blanket on cold, rainy nights, the quiet embrace when the world outside was too cruel. No one could separate them, no one but tragedy. Never gives a warning every day at recess. Rangers stood outside the chain-link fence of Pin Hill, elementary ears, perked deep, brown eyes patiently watching the playground. He never barked, never caused trouble. He just waited for the moment. Lily would run to the fence, smiling brightly, and say, "I'm here." "Ranger, did you miss me?" And always Ranger would wag his tail softly, as if to say, "I always miss you." But that day, Lily didn't come to the fence instead. Ranger heard a scream, small, frightened, but enough to make him alert near the old off-limits pond at the edge of the playground. Lily was trapped. Olivia Carter, the school bully, had stolen her notebook, the one filled with drawings of Ranger of their imaginary adventures. "Look at this," she writes letters to her dog. Olivia sneered, holding the notebook high as her friends laughed. "Give it back," Lily pleaded, her voice cracking. Olivia didn't. Instead, she ripped out the pages and tossed them into the murky water. Lily gasped, scrambling toward the pond, desperate to save what little remained, but her small shoes slipped on the damp grass, and before anyone could react, she fell. In panic, Spread Olivia and her friends froze. No one jumped in. No one knew what to do. But Ranger did. The moment Lily went under, Ranger reacted without hesitation. He leapt over the 4-aught fence, something no ordinary dog could do. Teachers screamed as the large K9 suddenly appeared on the playground. But Ranger didn't care. He ran, he hit the water without slowing, the cold cutting through his thick coat. But it didn't matter. Lily was sinking, her tiny hands reaching up desperate for, or something. Anything with trained precision. Ranger reached her, gently, grabbing onto the collar of her shirt, pulling her toward the surface. They broke through. Lily coughed, gasping for air, her small hands clutching. Onto Ranger fur, he dragged her to shore, his paws digging into the muddy bank, but in her panic, Lily flailed her arms, striking Ranger hard across the head. A cut opened above his eye, blood mixing with the water on his face. Still Ranger didn't move. He didn't leave her side. Then the shouting began. That dog attacked her. Someone cried, "Why is it on school grounds? What did it do to Lily?" Lily tried to speak, but her words were drowned out by the murmurs. The accusations. Olivia and her friends remained silent, unwilling to tell the truth. And so the story twisted Ranger. The hero was now seen as a threat, and that was when the real tragedy began. Lily screamed until her voice was hoarse. "No, you can't take Ranger. He saved me," but no one listened. Within a single day, the incident at Pin Hill Elementary spread like wildfire. Parents panicked. Neighbors whispered. No one cared about Lily's protests. All they saw was a powerful canine, blood on his face, standing over a trembling little girl. Mark Dawson fought back, but the decision had already been made. The school banned Ranger from school grounds. The insurance company warned that if they kept a dangerous animal in their home, their policy would be revoked. In the end, the Dawson had no choice. Ranger had to leave. That afternoon, Mark's truck sat idling in the driveway. Jake Foster, a former K9 trainer, had agreed to take Ranger in at his farm 50 miles away. Lily was on her knees in the grass, her arms wrapped tightly around Anger's neck, tears soaking into his fur. "Please don't take him," she sobbed. "I won't go near the pond again. I won't go to school. Just don't make him go." Mark turned away, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. Ranger didn't resist. He didn't fight, but he also didn't wag his tail. Instead, he rested his head gently on Lily's shoulder, taking a deep breath, one that seemed to hold all the love he had for her. Finally, Mark pulled away. Ranger obeyed, jumping into the truck bed, but the moment Mark shut the tailgate, Ranger turned, his deep brown eyes locking onto Lily's, a look she would never forget. The truck began to roll forward. Lily ran, her small feet pounding against the pavement. "Ranger, come back, please." But the truck kept going. Ranger kept watching her, his gaze unwavering until she disappeared from view. And then Lily collapsed, sobbing into her mother's arms. It felt like her whole world had just been torn apart. Since the day Ranger left, Lily was no longer herself. She stopped talking, stopped drawing, stopped smiling. Her once colorful room, filled with sketches of Ranger and their imaginary adventures, now felt empty and cold. Every night, she curled up in bed, hugging one of Mark's old shirts, the one Ranger used to sleep on. She closed her eyes, trying to pretend he was still there, just outside her door, like always. But when she reached out, all she touched was emptiness. She called Ranger's name in her sleep, but no one answered. Rachel and Mark watched their daughter wither before their eyes, powerless to stop it. Meanwhile, 50 miles away, Ranger wasn't doing any better. Jake Foster had trained dozens of canines before, but he had never seen one. Like Ranger, he refused to eat, showed no interest in anything. No matter what Jake tried, Ranger simply lay by the fence, staring down the road toward Pine Hill, as if waiting for someone to come get him. He was waiting day after day. Lily grew weaker, She barely ate, barely spoke at school. Teachers noticed she no longer paid attention, no longer engaged in class. She's not the same, they told Mark and Rachel with concern. She doesn't talk to anyone. She just stares out the window. The breaking point came when Lily suddenly collapsed on the school playground. She was rushed to Pin Hill General Hospital. After a series of tests, the doctor's voice was grave. She's not just sick. Physically, she's wasting away from grief. What they didn't know was another soul was fading along with her. Jake Foster woke in the middle of the night with an uneasy feeling. The farm was too quiet. No sound of Ranger pacing the porch. No gentle scratch of paws against the wooden floor. Something was wrong. Stepping outside, Jake saw the gate to the kennels pushed open. Ranger was gone. No tracks, no sound. He hadn't run away. He was going home. Through the darkened roads, a lone figure sprinted beneath the cold night sky. Each step pounded like a heartbeat, a relentless rhythm driving him forward. The wind whipped through his thick fur, biting at his skin. But he didn't stop, not when Lily was waiting. Ranger wasn't lost. He knew the way. He ran through muddy back roads across fields and forests, dodging traffic. With the precision of a trained K9 motorist, reported sightings of a massive black and tan shepherd bolting along the highway, eyes wild yet determined, at Pine Hill General Hospital. Lily remained unconscious, but then something strange happened. Her vitals strengthened. Why are her greetings changing? A doctor murmured, puzzled. Lily's lips parted. Her voice was barely a whisper. Ranger Lily didn't make it. That was what the doctors told Mark and Rachel that morning, that her little heart, growing weaker by the day, had finally given out the town of Pine Hill. Morn, they gathered at the cemetery on a grey, sombre M to say goodbye to the little girl who had once carried a notebook full of drawings of her beloved dog. A small white coffin rested among a sea of lies. Rachel sat beside Mark, her eyes hollow, empty. No mother should ever have to bury her child. Then a sudden commotion shattered the heavy silence. Gasps rippled through the mourners as a dark blur burst through the gravestones, fur matted with dirt, body trembling from sheer exhaustion, yet eyes burning with purpose. Ranger thinner, covered in mud, but eyes burning with purpose. "Stop that dog," someone shouted, but Mark held up a hand. Ranger didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, placing his massive paws on the pristine white coffin. At first he let out a low, mournful whimper. Then his whimpers turned into desperate scratches, pawing at the wood, as if trying to dig through fate itself. Then he started scratching softly at first. Then urgently, his body trembled as he whined again. Desperate, something in the air shifted. A doctor among the crowd stepped forward, eyes narrowing as he studied the dog. Then, as if driven by pure instinct, he dropped to his knees beside the coffin. "Open it." His voice was barely above a whisper. Gasps rippled through the Mers, but then Mark moved hands. Shaking, he reached for the key, unlocked the lid, and slowly lifted it open. Time stood still. A collective gasp filled the air, then movement, a faint rise and fall of her chest, and then a shaky breath. Lily was alive at first. No one dared to believe what they were seeing. Rachel covered her mouth, eyes wide with shock. Mark stood frozen, his hands gripping the edge of the coffin, as if afraid that one wrong move would shatter this fragile moment. But this wasn't a dream. Lily blinked, her face pale and exhausted. She glanced around, confused, until her gaze finally landed on Ranger, the dog who had never given up on her, his fur dirty, but his eyes filled with pure devotion. A single tear slipped down her cheek. "Ranger?" she whispered, her voice barely there. Weakly, she reached out, and in an instant Ranger leapt forward, burying his head against her chest, whining softly. Lily clung to him, her tiny fingers gripping his fur as sobs racked her fragile body. "You came back," she choked out. Ranger didn't wag his tail like he always did. Instead, he simply pressed himself closer, as if making sure she was real warm. And alive, the cemetery erupted in gasps and tears. Mark dropped to his knees beside them, wrapping his arms around both his daughter and her dog. Rachel sobbed openly, her trembling hand stroking Lily's hair. No one could explain what had happened, but no one needed an explanation. Lily was back, Ranger was back, and they were together again forever. The story of the miracle at Pine Hill Cemetery spread throughout the town. No one could explain what had happened, but one truth was undeniable. Ranger had saved Lily not once, but twice. When she recovered, Lily returned to school with Ranger by her side. Died, the ban was lifted, and Ranger was no longer seen as a threat. He was honored as a hero. Pine Hill changed the town, recognized its mistakes, and came together not just for Lily, but to heal the damage they had caused. School policies were adjusted, creating a special area for children and their pets at a special assembly. Lily stood before the entire school, Ranger sitting faithfully beside her, his coat now clean, his eyes filled with peace. She smiled gently, resting her hand on his head, and said, "True love never leaves you behind." Her words echoed in the hearts of everyone there, and from that day forward, the story of Ranger and Lily became a legend in Pine Hill.